The next part of this Adobe Animate tutorial is going to go over the Tools section. Tools will include some of the drawing and navigation tools. If you have the classic user interface selected, like we did in the last tutorial, the Tools toolbar section will live over in this left side of the stage area. You are able to expand it out and compress it down depending on how much space you want or how you want it to be laid out. Before I show you some of the drawing tools, let's make sure that we're at frames per second at 24 frames per second, and that the size of our stage screen is 720 by 540 pixels. That's what I'm going to be using. You may use other size framings if you want, but to keep things consistent, this is what I suggest. So over in the Tools section over here on the left side, you're like all Adobe digital drawing products like Photoshop and Illustrator, you're going to have similar tools like this. The top tool here is the selection tool. It will default to that, and since there's nothing really in here to select, this is an inactive tool. Let's go down here and let's start with some of the basic drawing tools. Remember that Adobe Animate works with vector graphics and not bitmap graphics. Vector graphics have an advantage that you can scale them up and down without losing any kind of quality or resolution loss. So all of the either pencil strokes or paint strokes are going to be vector graphics, and you'll see what that looks like in a second. Let's start with the pencil tool. I'm going to select the pencil tool here, and you'll notice that it will change the properties. So I'll have some settings that I can change with my pencil tool. Pencil tool is just like it is. It's just a drawing tool like that, and I can draw a line. I can change the size of that line. Let's make it a little bigger. So that's a 9.5 line. I can also type in, to have more specific line thickness. Notice that when I'm drawing this line with the pencil tool, that it is kind of angular and jagged. If you go down to the bottom of the tool section, in the pencil tool specifically, I'm going to deselect that and select it. You're going to be given this option down at the bottom, what kind of mode you want your pencil tool to draw in. And this is the straighten mode, which keeps things angular. You also have the smooth mode, which will automatically smooth out the line depending on how fast and how accurately I draw it. You also have the ink mode, which will just keep the line consistent to how I draw it, either with my mouse or the pen tablet that we have here. I generally like to keep it on the smooth mode with my pencil tool. Let's just delete all these out. If I select the keyframe up here, I can delete all those strokes out of there and just start with a fresh slate. So I have it on the smooth mode, and I can draw basically anything in the smooth, and it'll generally smooth it out like that. I can also change the level of smoothing. Let's just put it at 100, and it'll smooth out a little more. If we go down to like 25 or 26, it won't smooth as much. Let's just make the smoothing, I don't know, about 75 here, and we can kind of draw like that, in that fashion. Notice that if I now were to go to the select tool, because this is a vector graphic, I can take these lines and I can now, because they're vector graphics, I can manipulate them around like that. Sometimes with the vector graphics you get these little artifacts, and you can select and delete those away if you want. And you can basically manipulate your pencil line using the select tool. let's look at the sub-selection tool. And if you do the sub-selection tool, what that'll do is it'll show you those points in your pencil line where it kind of separates. If you noticed over in the regular selection tool, I grab something and it'll grab like a section depending on how many bends or places in the line that have a separation. The sub-selection tool will allow me to find those places a little more accurately, and also let's just do this one here. And also I have a Bezier curve manipulator here that will kind of make the line a little bit more easily editable. Okay, so again, I'm just gonna, if I wanted to delete all these things, there's two ways I can do that. I can take the selection tool and I can drag them out like that, select them and press delete, or I can just select them all in the timeline up here, because every time I make a drawing in here, it's going to make a little hash mark in the timeline, and just delete them out like that. The next tool I want to show you is the brush tool, which is below this other brush tool, but I'm just going to use this brush tool here. And you're going to have, now this is not a line, this is a fill tool, and this is like a paintbrush. So what that allows me to do is to paint along, and I can get another color here, and I can paint some strokes here. I can change the width over here in my properties here. Oh, I thought I could change that. I guess not. I do have these different brush shapes that I can play with. Let's see what we got here. And if you were using a tablet pen, you'll have pressure sensitivity as well. Oh, you can use pressure. And let's just see what we got here. So again, this is like a thing that you should maybe play around with and experiment around with using the different brush tools. I'm going to use the select tool again. And notice now I can do some manipulation with the selection tool like I did with the pencil tool, but as you can see, it has a different kind of effect. It doesn't move the whole line, it'll move the borders of the line. So now I can do some manipulation that way. So I'm going to select all this, delete them out. I'm going to go up here to the line tool. Sometimes this is a very valuable tool. And what this will do, this is like a pencil stroke. I'm going to change the color. You can change the color of the pencil stroke. I'm going to make it blue. No, I'm going to make it green. How about that? And I'm going to draw a line like that. I'm going to make it a little bit thicker so you can see it. So this is just a pencil line. It's just a straight line. And I'm going to draw two of them. Excuse me. And then I'm going to go to the selection tool, and as you can see, I can now manipulate that line using the manipulation, the selection tool. And that's just a straight line. You look down here, you'll see this little magnet. So what that'll do is that'll snap objects to the line. So I go there, and I can snap, boom, and it'll close up that it'll close up that circle there. If I undo that, it will not just snap. I have to actually put it to that section there. I'm going to leave a little bit of a space here, because what I'm going to show you now is the fill tool, which is the paint bucket, which fills in an area here. And I'm going to fill that in. I'm going to choose a red, and I'm going to go here, and I'm going to try to fill it in. You just go in and you just try to fill with that section there. And if you notice, it's not filling in. That's because there's a space here. And what you ideally want to do is close up those spaces. And then you can use the bucket tool, fill in the enclosed section of the line tool. I'm going to do that. You also have these things, if things don't close up, you have these this tool here which will close certain gaps in here. If I were to say, for example, make a gap here, just kind of make a little gap there, choose the bucket tool, and it won't close that gap. If I would say close the large gaps, and it's still not doing it. For some reason it doesn't like this particular gap, but I should be able to close these gaps here if it's a small gap, and close it up like that. So that is your fill tool. I'm going to select this and delete it, and then you also have these primitives here, which you can just automatically draw certain certain geometrical shapes. So I want to make sure that my stroke color is done correctly. Pencil color, I'm going to grab that. So the pencil color is black and the fill color is red. I can go into this rectangle tool and I can make a rectangle just like that. I can go into the oval tool, make it oval. If I hold the shift key, it'll keep it scaled to a circle. You also have this polygonal tool here, which will make a polygon tool just like that. And then if you now notice that the fill and the lines are separate. Okay, if you wanted to select everything, you have to make sure that you press the shift and you select the object, and then you can move it around like that. Also with the select tool, you're able to play around and make Control Z different shapes using this drawing tool. You can make a little star, you can make a little amoeba, you know, you can make different shapes by manipulating around with the certain tools that you have at your disposal. You also have a pen tool, which is something that you can draw more complex shapes like that. Having the selection tool, and then you have you can draw just more complex shapes that way. The other tool is the eraser tool, which could become very useful if you needed to erase something. You can tell it to erase everything like that. Let me just make the size of that brush, where is that, a little bit bigger. Okay, so you know, you can erase everything, or you can tell it to erase just the fills, so it's leaving the lines but erasing the fill, or you can tell it to erase the lines and it'll leave the fill, and then erase selected fill. If you were to just go and select the fill, erase selected fill, where is that eraser tool? It won't erase the deselected, it only erase the selected fill. So those are the basic tools that I like to show you. There are other tools in here that are relevant. This is actually a useful one, is the zoom in and out. By pressing the plus you can zoom in, pressing the minus you can zoom out, like so. And it's a navigational tool. Again, let's experiment around with some of those. They're just like they are in Photoshop, but these should be relevant to what you're going to need to do for a simple animation.